So there's been a whole lot of talk and a whole lot of debate about the Ten Commandments ever since Louisiana passed a bill that would require the Ten Commandments to be displayed in every public classroom. I saw a whole lot of interesting takes about it, and a lot of people had a lot of good things to say about it. But this next clip is one that I wanted to share with you guys because Ben Carson goes on CNN. He's being interviewed by Abby Phillips, and she asks us what I would consider now to be the million-dollar question, and that is, if the Ten Commandments are so important, have you ever saw them posted on any of Trump's properties? And Ben Carson goes complete deer in headlights because, yeah, how do you answer that? Roll the clip.
Have you, for example, ever seen the Ten Commandments up at any Trump properties?
I haven't specifically seen them. I don't know if they're there or not.
Shouldn't they be?
I wouldn't object to them being there. I don't object to them not being there.
But I'm saying if they're such universal, tenets, why are they not up where, former President Trump controls what happens? I mean, he owns those properties, he operates them. He could put them up. Shouldn't they be up?
Well, this is not about President Trump. This is about what is happening to the moral fiber of our nation. This is happening because people no longer respect other people. And these are rules of conduct that can help people to start understanding that we have an obligation to treat our fellow man in a certain way. And when we begin to teach that at a young age, it makes a big difference.
Well, I think that's great, actually. We do want to teach people values, but I think what people object to is the idea that those values come from any particular one religion. For example, there are parts of the world where they do not believe in the Ten Commandments as a text, as a historical text, as a religious text. Are those places not civilized? Are those places not teaching values?
Well, if the people of the state of Louisiana don't believe in it, they can do something about that, can't they?
You know, folks, I don't even really know where to start with this one because you would think that he would have threw us at least one left hook. You think he would have at least threw one curveball that might have made us stop and pause and think for a minute. But instead, he just set himself up to be picked apart because he doesn't have a leg to stand on in this argument. And I think right out of the gate, he realized that he was screwed, and he just tried to keep repeating the same talking points that MAGA loves to keep repeating, but they're not going to work, and they're especially not going to work with that question. First of all, he starts off by saying that he doesn't object to them being at Trump's properties, or he doesn't object to them not being there. Okay, so you wouldn't object to him not being at Trump. You're saying that Trump has a right to not display them if he wants to, but you think that every public classroom in the country should have it in it. You object to the fact that they're not in every public classroom, but you won't object if Trump decides he doesn't want to. So Trump has religious freedom. That's what he's saying. Trump has the freedom to do what he wants with religion, but it should be forced upon every child in this country, regardless of how their parents believe. So he really set himself up bad for that one. And then he wants to say this is not about President Trump, but about the moral fiber of our country. And it's about people not respecting each other. He really wants to go there with us on this one. Donald Trump is the leader of their movement. And as long as Donald Trump is the leader of their movement, they don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to the moral fiber of our country. You can't have Donald Trump leading and then say, we're about the moral fiber of our country and we're about people respecting each other, because Donald Trump does not respect anyone who disagrees with him. He is one of the most rude, loud, obnoxious people, most hateful and cruel-heartedest people I've ever seen come down the pike. And that's the guy that somehow or another become the face of evangelicals. He's a guy who paid hush money to a porn star to keep her quiet for an affair that he had while his wife was giving birth to his son. He wants to talk about the moral fiber of our country. He has been found liable of sexual abuse. He defamed the victim. And he wants to talk about the moral fiber of our country. He tried to overthrow the government and overturn an election that he knew he lost. He incited a riot on our nation's capital. And he wants to talk about people don't respect anyone anymore. Trump had no respect for the rule of law. Trump had no respect for the system. Everything has been rigged. Everything has been a hoax. Everything has been a witch hunt. And that's the guy that they have decided to throw all their support behind and have him lead their movement while they try to preach about the moral fiber of this country. And they wonder why that he's not growing. I mean, if you think about it, it's not like he's picking up new voters. He's not growing this base. He's not growing this following. If anything, he's pushing people away from it with bullshit like this. There's people walking away from it for these reasons right here, because they see it. And when you hold it up and you expose the hypocrisy of it, it's really hard to defend. I've sat and listened to people try to defend Trump and try to compare him to King David and try to say that, well, the Apostle Paul was out persecuting Christians before Jesus struck him with a blinding light. Well, let's go ahead and say that that story is true. I'm going to give you this one for a minute. Let's say that the story about the Apostle Paul is true, and that Paul was out there and he was beheading Christians. He was stoning Christians. You know, they say that he held the robe while they stoned Stephen to death. So let's say he was out there doing all those things. And let's say he really did get struck down by a blinding light. Well, when he did, he went out there and he stopped persecuting Christians. And he stopped being a bad dude. And when Jesus forgave people in the Bible, he would say, your sins are forgiven of you. Now go and sin no more. So if you want to compare Trump to people in the Bible, you're already lost that argument, because anytime Jesus forgave someone in the Bible, or anytime they suddenly was struck by some sort of blinding light, they had a conversion and they came around and then went out of their way to represent Jesus the best that they could. Donald Trump does none of those things. And like Abby said, if the Ten Commandments was so important to Trump and he loves them as much as he says he loves them, why aren't they hanging in every one of his hotels? Why aren't they hanging in his casinos? Why aren't they hanging at Mar-a-Lago? Where are they? And why does Trump never embody anything about Christianity or the Bible unless he's trying to sell you one? If there's a Bible in Mar-a-Lago today, it's the ones that him and Lee Greenwood cooked up to sell. We have seen people sit and build golden statues to this moron. We've seen people say that they've came to worship him. We have saw such a cult-like mentality with them absolutely worship him. I mean, you want to talk about worshiping a graven image. These people have worshiped more graven images of Trump than ever. And the only time Trump ever addresses the Bible or he ever addresses any of those things, it is to get votes. He's never doing it out of the goodness of his heart. Now, there's been presidents in the past that I disagree with, like George W. Bush. We'll use him for example. I never agreed with George W. Bush on much at all, and I felt a lot of times that he used Christianity to his advantage. But I could believe that George W. Bush was brought up in church because he talked about it. And whether I like him or not, he could quote the Bible and talk about the Bible. He had an understanding of it because he was at least brought up around it. And as bad as I can't stand Franklin Graham, if all of a sudden the evangelicals latched onto him and pushed him into the presidency, I would say, okay, well, he's the son of Billy Graham, so at least he's grown up around religion and been around it his whole life. Trump was never around it, never spoke about it, and never talks about it unless he's trying to profit off of it. And that's everything that the Bible preaches against. That's everything that Jesus preaches against. The only time that Jesus ever got violent in a church is when he walked into the temple and they were buying and selling in the temple. And he ran out the money changers and he turned over their tables and he said, you turned my father's house into a den of thieves. This was supposed to be a house of prayer. You turned it into a den of thieves. What do you think he would do if he came back today and he saw Trump selling Bibles that had the United States Constitution and the Pledge of Allegiance and all that crap attached to it, all in one big book with his name on the front? The Trump Bible. What do you think Jesus would really say if you believe that he would get that angry and throw people out of the temple? What do you think he would say to Donald Trump? Donald Trump has never embraced or embodied Christianity at all. He only does it when it benefits them. And that should offend Christians. That should truly offend you if you really believe in it. It offends me, and I no longer believe in it. And I'm offended for you. But yeah, you're not going to see the Trump couldn't quote the Ten Commandments. If you ask him to, I don't think he could get through it. I don't think he could quote John 3:16 if you ask him to. I don't think he could tell you the beginning, the middle, and the end. I don't think he could tell you anything about Jesus. I really don't, because it's always when he's asked about his faith, he'll say, well, I do great with evangelicals. Evangelicals love me. He never actually talks about it because he doesn't have one. Because he said himself, he doesn't see why that he would pray. Why would I pray? I've never done nothing wrong. And the very foundation of the belief in Christianity is that you have to be forgiven. I mean, I used to go to church and I would hear that all the time. Come on up here now. You must be forgiven. You must be born again. The only way you can enter into the kingdom is to be born again. And now these same ministers that used to tell me that are throwing their support behind the guy who said, yeah, I don't see why I should ever have to ask for forgiveness. I've not done anything wrong. Well, the preachers told me that I was born wrong. They told me that I had to be born again, and they give that guy a pass for it. Why? Because at the end of the day, he's furthering their agenda of hate. And they're weaponizing the government against people they disagree with, and that's why they back him. And if the Bible is true, Jesus already warned us about people like that, so I would be very paranoid if I was them and I realized, wow, there really is a judgment day. Yeah, if I was standing in that line and my name was Donald Trump, I'd be nervous.